Well, and I guess giving yourself permission to fail is also really important to your point. I mean, just because something didn't work doesn't mean it's a failure. That's what innovation a lot of times is, right? Is trying something and maybe it doesn't work, but you learn from it and then you think about something else from there. So I think it's also important to recognize that failure is sort of part of the journey too.
This episode is brought to you by Greenskies Analytics, an audit analytics service provider that works with internal audit departments that have data analysts and are still frustrated with trying to make analytics actually work, aren't getting the expected ROI, who can't break through the communication barrier between the analysts and the audit team, and those that need experienced direction for an audit analytics strategy and process. Those that feel like they've wasted time and money on trainings, aren't getting the value they want, not prioritizing the highest risk areas for the organizations, or have projects that seemingly never get completed. Do you deal with any of that? If you do, go to the show notes of this episode and click the Greenskies Analytics link, or go to greenskiesanalytics.com to schedule a call and understand how Greenskies Analytics makes analytics actually work for internal audit. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Audit Podcast. I'm your host, Trent Russell, and today on the show we have Stephanie Richard. She is the Chief Audit Executive at Ally Bank. A few of the things that we hit on during the show is how she was able to change the culture and the mindset for her internal audit team at Ally. She's got 150 plus auditors, so it's kind of hard to change the direction of that ship when you have that many folks that you're trying to change the mindset of and change the culture of, transform that culture into be more innovative. And so we definitely want to understand that and how everyone else could apply that kind of methodology and process she followed. And then with that, again, there's 150 auditors. How does she take the time to have a hand in that transformation? Because it is not very effective when it's the ivory tower, stroke of the pen. Hey, everyone, go be data-driven or go be AI-driven. And it just doesn't happen like that. One of the key elements for Stephanie in being an effective CAE is being able to see around the corner, as she put it. And so we want to understand exactly how she does that, as well as get her advice for any current or aspiring CAEs, how they could be more effective and more efficient in their job. And then aside from the things that we always talk about, insights, assurance, we want to, our organizations and leadership to sleep easy at night. What do you actually want, Stephanie, as a CAE? Here we go. So what is in either your internet browsing history or your ChatGPT history, your Llama history, any kind of LLM, what's been going on the past couple weeks in your world?
Yeah, I really do love ChatGPT. It's been such a fun little new way to be curious about the world. Recently, really the past weekend, I'd say what's in my ChatGPT is just curious about the hurricane. We had a hurricane come through, or tropical storm, I guess, at the point in North Carolina on Friday, and the western part of North Carolina has been hit pretty hard with that. And so I was just sort of curious about past hurricanes in that area. When was the last time they were hit, or when was the last time Charlotte, North Carolina, where I live, was hit. So I was just really curious about all the different hurricanes that have come through and the different impacts that the surrounding towns have sort of felt. I was also curious about how many people live in Chimney Rock, North Carolina, where unfortunately a whole town has been completely flooded out. So I just love being able to access that for quick, easy answers to just interesting topics.
And I think you said it twice, and I think it's probably the most important thing, and it's one of the qualities, the traits, when I ask people, like, in an auditor, what quality or trait, and curiosity has always been one that I went, yeah, if I had to pick, that would be it. And I think it's even more important with, like, a ChatGPT or an LLM, because the answer to pretty much any question you would ever have is now there immediately. You just have to be curious enough to ask it. And so I'm glad. I think
Yeah.
2 different times you were like, I was curious about. I think
Yeah.
that's a good way to look at it and go, if you're curious about something, go this way of doing that.
Yeah. And I also love it because I've been trying to use it more and more to improve my prompting. the better and the more just the more you get used to the way in which to prompt ChatGPT, you get better outcomes from it too. So just exploring and using it and finding different ways to give it a persona or just to prompt it better, you'll get better answers from it too. So it's about practicing with it, I think, too.
Yeah. Have you prompted it how to write your prompt yet?
I have not, but I will try that one.
It's effective. I did it. Write a prompt from you, the best prompt on how I would write this prompt. And it was like, here you go. And I went, cool. We'll just fill in the blanks.
That is cool.
So this is the kind of newer question we've been asking folks lately. Emojis in emails. Yay or nay for you?
I have been guilty of doing a smiley face here or there for sure, but doesn't probably go beyond that.
Somebody else we were asking, though, we asked that question and he was like, absolutely not in an email. He's like, if it's a text, though, that's a little different. And so it's kind of interesting. Like, I feel like emails are a little bit more professional, and then the hierarchy is email, LinkedIn's a little bit more casual, and then if I have somebody's phone number and they're okay with me texting them, that's usually like I'm talking to my best friend and texting him the same way and sending GIFs and everything else. I know you've changed the culture and the mindset at Ally for the internal audit team to be more transformative, more innovative, and it's a very large team. It's not an easy undertaking to scale that. If you have 10-ish people, maybe less, it's a little easier to be able to do that. But I know with a team your size, that's not, you can't just sit in the ivory tower and go, with a stroke of a pen, go, we're going to be data driven. Everybody go. You can't really do that.
Go innovate, everyone. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what are because it's a hot topic for everybody, especially with the way AI is advancing and everybody wants to be on top of that. How are you able to do that and scale it across 150 plus auditors?
Yeah, we have been. And I first sort of probably premise it by saying you can't approach it as something that you can achieve overnight. It really is a journey over multiple years. And it's about not approaching it not so much as an initiative, but as a way of life for your function. So I think the first thing we sort of did is we started taking stock in ourselves and really thinking about it from two angles. How are we perceiving ourselves in the organization? And then how did others perceive us? So one of the fun things that we did is we went on a little roadshow and we presented what we call the myths and facts of internal audit. And we did this across multiple teams in our organization, as well as for our own team. And what we discovered, for example, one of the many myths that I think folks that were outside of our team really had about who we were is, and this probably doesn't come as a surprise, but everyone thinks internal auditors are accountants. And so what we did is we took stock, we did some research around our team, and we understood across 150 plus people on our team, what degrees do they have? What is their past experiences? What certifications do they have? And we sort of collected that data and were able to present to ourselves as well as to our stakeholders, really the diversity within our team. We have people with psychology majors or marketing majors, not just accounting majors. Of course, we do have some accountants on staff, but we have this wide variety of folks with all this different backgrounds and experiences, and that really helped elevate sort of the uniqueness that we have as a team and in our organization. So that was one myth that we sort of debunked in the organization, and we used as an opportunity to start engaging in a conversation with people to make sure that the way we were presenting ourselves and the way that others were perceived us was not, sort of drown in these myths that may exist. I think the other thing that we did is we started taking certain words out of our vernacular, and one of those words is the word independence. And while we certainly appreciate and value the independence that internal audit has by way of us having a direct line of reporting to the audit committee, what we found was that it was actually holding us back if we were using it in a way where it automatically put a wall up against between us and other parts in the organization. So they didn't understand what we meant by independence. I think a lot of folks thought what we meant by independence is that they couldn't call us and that we were sitting on an island somewhere, sort of walled off from the rest of the organization. So we made it a point to sort of not really use that term in our everyday vernacular. Yes, it's certainly an element and an important element of our role, but what we found is inadvertently it was holding us back and holding others in the organization from including us and giving us a seat at the table. So, those are a couple of ways I think we started to really try to transform the way that we were viewed and the way that others sort of viewed us.
Yeah, and the roadshow idea, we've heard that a couple of times, but the uniqueness for sure with yours is gathering the data of this is what our background is. Hey, this is who we actually are. And then I think clearing the air on independence is really big too. I think even within the audit team itself, because there's so many different perspectives on independence. I mean, we used to ask that question constantly. That was one of our kind of standard questions, like, what's your opinion of independence, or how do you, roll with independence? And there's a lot of, it's a very much a judgment thing. And so everybody has a different almost definition of independence. And I say it's like a scale. There's people who are, and probably listeners are tired of me saying this, but I know someone who said, I can't have a relationship with the CAE because it impedes my independence. And I went, you're just doing your job poorly. That's what that sounds more like an excuse.
Well, and then similarly, I think our team, depending on your literal definition of independence, you could use it as a crutch to not do, things beyond what, traditional audit might suggest you should do. And I don't think that that's the right answer either.
Yeah. So I think even just as a team, everybody going, this is what we, like as a team, this is our approach to independence and kind of like how we define it. I think that's really good. I've probably shared this story a couple of times too, just on the perception of audit. I was at my sister-in-law's 40th surprise birthday party. And like, I didn't, it was her friends. I didn't really know, a lot of them. So just the typical, hey, what do you do? I do this, whatever. So this one guy came up to me and just shooting the breeze. And he's like, what do you do? And I started to roll my eyes. Like, I already know this is not going to be received very well. So I was like, I do analytics with internal audit departments. And like, Stephanie, I'm not joking. He put his hand on my shoulder and he went, nope. And he just turned around and walked away.
No, he didn't even want to be friends with you.
Not even like casual conversation. He came back and he's like, hey, he's like, I'm joking with you, but he's in some kind of real estate or something. He's like, I get audited constantly. And I was like, well, that's not really what I do. And then this is what we actually do and why it's, we support the strategy. And he went, oh, that's way better than what, the auditors basically that I deal with. So we have I think kind of a critical role to change the perception of internal audit to what it actually is, as opposed to the bean counters or the we're going to tattletale on you, kind of
the corporate police function is the other myth I think that we often get.
Right. All right. So I know in doing this, you're not ivory tower, go do all this stuff. You're very involved with it. So how do you carve out the time for your 150 plus auditors to have a hand in that transformation?
Yeah, a couple things. I think the great part about internal audit relative to maybe some other functions in the company is we have a really good handle on how and where people are spending their time. Because in order for us to strike an audit plan, we need to have an understanding of how many hours each audit's going to take or we anticipate it's going to take. And then as much as it can be a bit of a pain at times, we ask our team to sort of track their time. And we're not doing that from the standpoint of sort of policing our organization, but more so from the standpoint of we want to make sure that we have the right resources, the right number of resources, and that we can have confidence that we can complete the audit plan on an annual basis. But what we did is we said, let's lean into that and also carve out time for what we called our strategic transformation efforts. So about 5 years ago, when we struck our audit plan, we purposely allocated a certain number of hours out of that plan to dedicate team time for strategic transformation. And we did that across the entire team. So we didn't just create some centralized team, say within our practices group, that was responsible for transformation, and then everybody else just executed audits. What we did is we made it part of everybody's role within the organization and carved out time for everybody to have some input, either through idea generation or through involvement in what we called a strategic pillar work stream to help, be part of that transformation that we were really going after. I think the other thing that we did is we stopped really thinking about it as an initiative and started thinking about it as this is business as usual for us. And so just like we carve out time for audit projects and continuous monitoring and other activities, we need to make sure that we integrate strategic initiatives and strategic transformation into our own routines. So on leadership meetings, on all hands team meetings, you name it, we started to bring in the concept of what we were doing around people, process, and technology to really sort of transform the organization. And so it's become probably business as usual rather than approaching it sort of as a sort of one-time initiative with a start and an end date.
Got it. Okay. And then for not necessarily the hours, maybe even a percentage, but if I asked you, if someone else is listening right now, and a CAE is listening and they go, that's great. We need to do that. I like that mindset. We're going to start doing this. What would you say is the low percentage of hours per maybe auditor or as a group that you would budget off for that? Is it like, hey, if you can't budget at least 5% of your team's audit hours to this initiative, or sorry, I probably shouldn't say initiative, should I? I still have some work to do on my end. But 5% of this to that, then it's not gonna work. You need at least X amount. Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we looked at it, we said anywhere between 5 and 10%. And depending on the level in the organization, the leaders might have more time dedicated to do it versus the staff auditors. But really the point is that everybody was going to be part of this and everybody was going to make it part of their day job, whether that was 10% of their time or 5% of their time. We wanted to make sure that everybody had at least some allocation of time to feel like they had permission to be part of the transformation, as well as to generate ideas and to give their input to where we were going and ideas to advance the function, play around with data analytics, ask questions. Whatever the case may be, we wanted to make sure everybody felt that there was dedicated time across the entire team for this, and we really approached it no different than, any other thing that we want people to spend their time with.
I appreciate that. I feel like the listeners would appreciate that also, because most of the time when it comes to initiative, for lack of better words, like this, it's monetary budget, like what do we need to get approved? We got to go get these tools or do whatever it is, bring someone in, whatever it is. And I always go, yep, that's great. You got to figure that out. What does the hourly budget look like? And they always go, I didn't really think about that. Like, they're not going to do this at night or on the weekend. And so I think the folks who have maybe felt the pressure to, hey, you're doing your normal day-to-day audit work, and then on top of that, you have to learn XYZ or develop this new mindset or, whatever the case is. And you kind of do that on your own time. I think the folks that have had to deal with that are probably listening going, sweet, I'm passing this episode on to the CAE and going, you have to budget time for this for us.
Yes. And I think you also have to approach it. I said this earlier, but I think you also have to approach it as an entire organization. Mm-hmm. You can't just have a couple of people that are responsible for this and then they dictate everything down to the audit, function and the rest of the audit team. I think for it to be a true cultural transformation, it has to be everybody has some role in it to play.
Okay. And outside of that, the transformative piece, I know you said one critical piece to being an effective CAE, like we talked about curiosity earlier as a trait. So not necessarily a trait, but you said being able to see around the corner.
Yeah, it's a term that we actually use here at Ally a lot, is seeing around the corner. And what it really means is anticipating risks. In our world, it's anticipating risks or seeing something emerging that is on the horizon and then making sure that, we're thinking about that as we execute our work, and provide assurance, but also as we think about ourselves and our own transformation journey. And so, a couple ways that I think we try to do that, or I try to do that in particular, is one is, really understand the business of the business. It's something a term that I use of making sure that you can't audit what you don't understand, right? And so, and the way you do that is you have to do research ahead of time. When you're getting ready for a meeting with another stakeholder, make sure that you understand what are the emerging trends in their business. What is their strategy? What are their strategic objectives? Understand sort of what's happening in the environment around them, and use that to engage in the dialogue. And it's important to make sure you're engaging in that dialogue outside of just talking about, audit work and audit findings. And you can do your job a lot better if you really understand what's happening, because then you can incorporate that into your audit plan and your current audit scoping, and make sure you have more of that forward-looking view, the windshield view, not the rear-view mirror view, as I like to say, into the way that you're doing your audit work. You can't just set an audit plan and expect that you're just going to execute that audit plan. Sort of approach it like any sort of forecast. It's probably only good for the day that you strike it, and then it's going to change. But you can work within the confines of it, but you do have to anticipate that, the world is constantly changing around you, and you have to be able to understand what's happening around you in order to be successful.
I don't think I've heard the audit plan as being a forecast, but I think that's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah. It's your best guess at any point in time, but you're going to constantly refresh that with new information as it comes your way.
I think especially because I know sometimes CAEs can be tough depending on their experience level, it seems like for the most part, to go, hey, I know we said we were going to do this and it's on the audit plan, but this other thing's more important, so we're going to do that now. And I feel like some people struggle with that, and especially depending on maybe even how old school the audit committee is, if they go, nope, there's the plan, you execute on the plan. I think being able to phrase it as, this is just a forecast, there's no way of knowing, what the risks are going to be 2 months from now. So this is our kind of best guess forecast right now, and then we're going to, update it quarterly or whatever, kind of makes sense. So that's a refreshing look at it. I like that.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the transformation journey too, is getting people out of the mindset that you have to kind of create a plan and stick to it, and not be mindful of the things that are sort of happening around you.
I feel like there's current or aspiring CAEs that they're listening. That's already a great takeaway for them as to, hey, maybe we look at the audit plan as a forecast. But what other advice would you give to current or especially maybe aspiring CAEs?
Right. Yeah, this is probably not all that new or profound, but I'd say, it's really about relationships, right? Being an internal audit and a chief audit executive is more about relationships than it is about compliance. And you have to spend the time to build those relationships and understand what your stakeholders are worried about, what's keeping them at night, how you can help them. I think the other thing is that if you want stature in the organization, it doesn't just come because of the way the org chart is displayed. In other words, because we have to have a seat at the table doesn't automatically give us stature at the table. And so I think that you have to be able to first understand the business of the business so that you can ask insightful questions. You can offer advice and opinion, and be able to think on your feet in the middle of a discussion to offer those insights. So it's not enough just to have a seat at the table. You have to earn it and keep your seat at the table.
So aside from all the stuff that we typically hear that we have to offer, or CAEs feel like they have to offer, insights, assurance, my executives and management sleeping easy at night, of all that, what do you actually want as a CAE?
besides an open checkbook for unlimited resources.
Yeah.
You know, I think a couple things come to mind probably. One is just to be able to continue to embrace disruption and not get stuck. And it's hard sometimes because we do have a lot of demands and we do have a lot of work to do. And we work in the financial services industry, so we have a lot of not only our own expectations, but that of our regulators as well. And so it's easy to sort of put innovation on the back burner because, when all these other things are coming at you and you have all these other priorities and stakeholders and people need this and that, it's easy to put that on sort of the back burner. And so I guess as a CEA, what I want to be able to do is make sure that we don't get stuck or we don't put that on the back burner and that we can continue on this journey and keep pace with the world around us, the technology advancements, and kind of skill our workforce for that sort of current and future state as well. I think that would be sort of what I would want as a CAE, is just for us to be able to continue to have some permission to be able to, continue this journey and innovate and embrace disruption the way we have been over the last several years.
I like the way you stated that. I'm curious for, like, with these types of, again, lack of a better word, initiatives. I think when it hits is when it becomes a habit for the team. And so it's a little different to begin with from their day to day, but then gradually it just becomes a habit and that's just kind of part of it. How long would you say, not necessarily like how long did it take before this was effective or before you saw some ROI on it or something like that? How long do you feel like before it was a habit of the team to have this mindset, this transformative mindset? You know what I mean? So instead of just like feeling like, hey, we got to keep pushing this thing down their throats almost, like, nope, this is our day to day. We get it. That's who we are now.
Yeah, I would say probably 3 years. Yeah. I mean, in the grand scheme of life, that's still a very short period of time, right? But yeah, I'd say, a good solid 3 years to sort of get it just what I call more in our DNA, right? And just make it just part of our regular conversations, our regular interactions with ourselves and our stakeholders, regular discussions with the audit committee, you name it. It's sort of, but then when it happened, when we sort of like look back and you say, well, when did that sort of happen? It really then has taken off tremendously, right? Because it was no longer something that we had to, like you said, force down people's throats or keep hammering home. It would just sort of happen naturally. And then, boy, to watch the juices flow and the ideas generating and people coming to us and asking us, well, how did you do that? Or how can we, lean into what you've done? It's been incredible to sort of see that all of a sudden that light bulb almost click on.
I appreciate the transparency. I'm sure the listeners do too. Because I feel like a lot of folks go, all right, we have 6 months to get this knocked out, or whatever it is. And you go, that's pretty unrealistic. And so to hear 3 years, I think a lot of people are going, okay, that's the, expectation, or that's
right.
What it could be. And like, let's be patient with this thing and keep going at it, as opposed to, we tried it didn't work. That's probably one of the biggest things we hear with analytics and AI initiatives in general is, yeah, we tried it and it didn't work. And it's like, well, what did you do? Because it is possible. Like, we've seen it at other places. So we know that it's possible.
Right.
So I think patience is probably big on this.
Well,
also.
And I guess giving yourself permission to fail is also really important to your point. I mean, just because something didn't work doesn't mean it's a failure. That's what innovation a lot of times is, right? Is trying something and maybe it doesn't work, but you learn from it and then you think about something else from there. So I think it's also important to recognize that failure is sort of part of the journey too.
I'm going to give the floor to you now. So, for the most part, we spend a lot of time picking the brains of our guests to go, how can we do this better? What did you do? What can we learn from it, etc. But I want to give you a chance now. I think I've asked all my kind of selfish, these are the questions I want to know, how you're doing it over there. And just give the floor to you, though. And so I'll let you take us home. What do you want to leave the audience with today?
I think that I sort of say this. I think more than ever, internal audit's at this sort of crossroads or fork in the road, right? And you can go right to continue to try to like innovate and change the profession, or you can go left. And either way, you'll still have a function, you'll still have a role in your company. But I think it really depends which road you take in terms of the level of relevance that you'll have, the level of value that you can provide your organization. So I also think that that crossroads is really important too, because we need as a profession to continue to draw people to this profession. And, I think the only way you're going to get those resources, the diverse resources, the critical thinkers, the curious minds, is if you go on sort of the right path and think about our profession in a much different way than in the past. So for me, I think it's just a really exciting time to be part of this profession more than ever, because I do feel like we're at that crossroads where, yes, we can go left and still be relevant, but I think we need to go right and up our game a little bit in terms of how much we provide in value and how relevant we are, as well as, like I said, get people to want to come and work in the profession.
Hey everyone, thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Audit Podcast. Whatever platform you're listening on right now, I'm sure there's a subscribe button somewhere, so please hit the subscribe button there. If you're listening through iTunes or Spotify, feel free to go give us that 5-star rating. It only took me about 16 seconds to give myself a 5-star review, and it really helps to get future guests to come on the show, so we'd really appreciate that. Lastly, be sure to check out the show notes and follow us on all our social media channels on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Also, if interested, please sign up for our weekly newsletter from the Audit Podcast. Thank you all. Have a great one.